What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another week here on Finding Direction. This week, I'm sitting down with my man, Darryl Bellamy Jr., and this dude is going to help you step into taking more fearless action. Now, a little bit about Darryl. He is a fear researcher. He's an author. He's an entrepreneur, and he's a speaker where he helps provide people with actionable steps and strategies so that you can go from fearful to fearless. All right. Now, on this episode, we talk about, for example, the importance of how when you add competition to a healthy habit you want to develop. If you want to develop something that can help you in your life, how adding some competition to it may be that extra edge that needs you to actually develop that as a habit. All right. We also talk about how do you take more fearless action. Right? We sometimes know that the fear action that we step into, the actions that we're fearful of, when we step into those actions, that's really where the growth happens in our life. And that's where we discover, quite honestly, a whole new level of life. So we talk about that. And we also talk about if you believe that the entrepreneur calling is your calling, how do you figure out what exactly that entrepreneurship calling is that you're supposed to step into? All right, so we talk about all of this and a lot more on the episode. If you have not yet, before we dive in, if you could please subscribe to the podcast so we can make sure you get this every week as we release our 2 episodes. And then also, if you have a friend that you know is trying to, figure out their life, or a friend that maybe needs to step into their fear so that they can really grow, send them this episode, and I promise you they're going to send you something back that says, thank you for sharing this. All right, so without that, we are going to dive right into this week's episode, everybody, and here we go. Darryl Bellamy Jr., my man, how are you doing today?
I'm good, man. Thanks, Stu, for the invite. What's up to the Finding Direction audience? What's up, y'all? Let's go.
Let's go. My man, I'm excited to dive in today. Even before we start recording, a lot of good just conversation, dialogue, honestly, all around like making an impact, which, I know resonates with both of us. And so I'm curious, let's say we go way back in your story. What was life like for little Darryl? Fill us in. What was your life like as you grew up?
All right. So for me growing up, if my sister or my mom or my parents are on here, they would tell you how I was I used to ask for office supplies for Christmas, paper.
Really?
I was always a business person in a way. I always not only loved business, but at the end of the day, also loved they would say money.
Yeah.
So I always wanted to in school, I had a candy. I was one of the kids who had went to Sam's Club, right? And was selling candy, found stickers, selling those to neighborhood kids. So I always wanted to find a way to take $1 and be able to multiply that to find out investing. I was always really big on self-development. So was a huge fan of the library. So always reading different books. That was always a big piece of who I was. What else, man? And even in high school, still on the self-development train, I remember one of my friend's parents, I was over his house and I went through his bookshelf and he had Rich Dad, Poor Dad for teens on his bookshelf. And I came downstairs on the couch and I was reading it. His mom was like, Jim, you never read that book. Darryl, I've been trying to get him to read that book for 4 to 5 years. And I picked it up and started reading it. That was the first time I ever read that book, right? And it, of course, changed my mindset. I told you earlier how I, in high school, I convinced, my teacher and my principal to let 3 to 4 other students get an excuse absence to go to the Get Motivated conference where Colin Powell was speaking, Zig Ziglar, all of those guys. Yeah. So I would say on my journey, all of those moments kind of led me to where I am today.
Yeah. So how did you first get introduced to personal development? Were your parents playing Zig Ziglar all day, or how'd you get introduced to it?
I don't know. How did I first get introduced? I do not know. I'm trying to think. I remember some of the first, one of my first moments I can think of was when I was watching, it might've been Oprah, to be honest. I remember watching some of the Oprah shows, and I remember, cause she's always talking about self-development and personal development. Yeah. And on top of that, I remember when she first spoke about The Secret. years ago.
Ah,
And I remember Netflix, some of y'all might not remember this who are listening to this, but Netflix used to be like a DVD. So you used to like have to submit like DVDs and they would send you like DVDs once you sent one back. I remember getting The Secret and watching that. And I think that was a huge moment in my life to realize that I can create some of the things that I wanted in my life, of course, with work, right? It's not just like thinking of it and it happening. So that was one moment. I can remember like going to the library and getting books. One of my first things I was interested in was like real estate. So back then I was a huge Trump fan. So I read every single real estate book that like Donald Trump, like Art of the Deal, like all of those, every Kiyosaki book. So it was just amazing that back then I was still in that. But I don't know how that got started, Stu. I don't remember.
And this was in like high school then when you really started to dive into some of this.
High school, I would say early high school is from what I can remember when it came to the whole self-development phase.
Interesting. So walk me through, like, you hear through a parent's friend, like Zig Ziglar, he's speaking at this conference. It's the like Get Motivated conference, I think you said it was. Like, what in your brain made you go like, I need to go to this? Because you know what I mean? Like oftentimes in life, there's like, oh, that would be cool or whatever. But it's like, as you're, maybe 15, 16, 17 years old, you're like, I need, you know what I mean? Like what made you want to go to it?
So I would say that a lot of those books and stuff and the information I was consuming, I would say that a lot of those books talked about self-development, how important it was to like becoming that successful individual. And for me, I always wanted to be successful, always wanted to be an entrepreneur in some way, always wanted to have an impact. And because I'm saying I read a lot of those books and they were all probably saying some of those same things, I think it was just instilled in me to like want to learn and want to grow in some way. So it was like a pamphlet I received in the mail that they probably mass marketing, right? And I received it in the mail and I was like, oh, this is interesting. So I don't really know for sure, but I'm guessing that a lot of those books probably showed me that was the way to go. And I tapped into it. Yeah.
For you, was there like a moment where you remember diving into personal development as like a younger person? Was there like a moment you remember, like a click or a shift where you were like, holy crap, like basically like the way you looked at the world started to change? Did you ever have anything like that, or like a major takeaway when you were first diving into this? Because you had to have been getting something good to say, I'm gonna keep doing it. I'm gonna do more of it. I'm gonna read more books. Like, you know what I mean? Did you have like any major aha shifts, big takeaways from those early days diving into it?
So let's talk about maybe middle school, elementary school. I remember something called AR, which is accelerated reading. So AR, for those listening, is something where like you read books, and then based on those books, certain books, you actually get on a computer and you take like a 10-question test based on that book. And then based on the score that you get a certain amount of points, and then you're ranked by grade level, like how many points you have. So like there's like the top 3 students in the class, or then the top 3 students in the grade. And then depending on how many points you get, like prizes that you can like at the end of the day trade in to get something. So I remember, like, I've always been competitive. So there was this one girl named Angela Baseda who was like this straight A student, always like, she would read like a book a night, and I wanted to beat her. So I remember literally reading almost like 1 to 2 books a night. Like not 1 to 2 books, but probably she would do it because she could, I guess she was a speed reader in 3rd grade. Yeah. But I would read like some books I didn't read in the night, but somehow I would read like 1 or 2, it would take me time. But I remember reading so many books out that year. She still beat me at the end of the year, but I was number 2 in the whole school. Right. So I think part of it was probably that competitive spirit in me that got me actually reading. And then once I started doing that, it already kind of became a habit. Yeah, so I probably would say, honestly, Stu, you're helping me realize that was probably how that habit was formed to read. And then it just never stopped from there. Yeah. And then my parents always said, my dad always said that the 2 important skills to have is to be able to speak well and be able to write well, both very important skills to have growing up. And they always encourage my reading. Probably thinking that reading will probably help me to do those 2 things even better. The more you know, the more you gain. And there's so much knowledge that's found in those books as well. So,
I think it's interesting and like cool for someone else. If you like, I grew up hating reading. And I think one thing that I hear from you that's interesting is like this competitive edge. Cause like many of us have this competitive nature, right? Where we're like, oh, like Angela was her name, right?
Yeah.
You're like, Angela's not going to beat me or whatever. Like, I remember when I grew up, my parents were literally like, we'll pay you $10 to like go read this Harry Potter book. And I was like, like, no, like I hate reading, you know what I mean? And I didn't realize till way on later in life that like reading actually has some incredible benefits.
Yeah.
But I think it's interesting to like ask yourself, how can you add something to reading or something else that you maybe don't really want to do in life, but can benefit you? How do you add another element to it? So all of a sudden now you have a drive to do it, because then once you start doing this thing that's going to benefit you, then it almost becomes like an addiction, right? Like now I'm sure if you don't read a book in a week or two, you're like itching. You're like, I need to read a book. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Or consume some sort of knowledge, right? So
Yeah.
I have my regular books that I buy. I also do Audible, right? I also do Blinkist, right? Where I can read books shortly. I have YouTube where I'll go and like read reviews of different books. I go to conferences. So now I'm not stuck as I was younger, like just with one book. I can like have conversation with you. Like there's so many other options. But I would say that early knowledge, that early competitive spirit kind of like helped me to flow where I am right now. And as you just said, if we can take that competitive energy or take that other, that lane and apply that to other things that we might not want to do, I can't imagine what other things we might be able to accomplish.
Right. It's like if you know, and like studies show this, like the way you eat, the diet, things you put in your body have a direct correlation to like the amount of energy you have. And then obviously that impacts the rest of your life. And it's like, let's say you're like, you're like, I just don't like eating healthy or whatever it is. It's a simple example. It's like, well, maybe there's a friend you could start a competition with or something like that, and like channel that sense. And then once you're in that competition for 30 days and you feel the difference of like, wow, like I actually don't feel tired and groggy all day. I feel like energized. I feel I have so much more clarity in my life now because you've inserted this like competitive aspect to it and you've seen the benefits. Now you're just going to keep the habit going with the competition or not.
Yeah. You can flow from there.
Yeah. So let's go forward then in your life. You go to college, and I'm curious, like as you go to college and you're going through this, did you have an idea of what you wanted to do after?
Yes. So for me,
Awesome.
I always love business. I love operations. Like I love everything about like I'm just a business guy, right? So I majored in business management because I knew that at some point, I didn't think I would speak. I didn't think I would do those things, but I thought I would work for a bank or work for a corporation or a company, right, coming right out of college. So I went to school, got the business or, did business stuff throughout. What else did I do? I'm trying to think throughout college that kind of like led me to where I am.
Well, so let me ask you this.
Go ahead.
So you graduate college.
Mm-hmm.
What goes through your head at that point? Because you're like, I know I want to own a business one day. So when you graduate, do you go, I'm starting a business, I'm just figuring it out? Or do you go like, I'm going to go work somewhere else, build it on the side, I'm going to learn? Like what was going through your head as you took, I guess, your first step into like the real world?
So when graduation time came around, there was a competition at my school for like a business incubator, like start a business thing. So I created this concept called College Concierge. And the goal of College Concierge was a like 100 student like membership, only for 100 students, first year students that will allow them to get things like food delivered to them. That was before Uber Eats was out. Help them get around things, right? So Uber was out. Leadership development. So throughout that first year, like give them like leadership workshops, all that stuff that I enjoy, help them get around campus, all of those. I need 100 parents to sign up. And I got one parent to sign up. So I didn't take a job coming right out of college at all. I was on a friend's couch for a few months, like the typical story, right? On a friend's couch, ramen noodles, like just trying to figure out. I thought that my graduation money was going to help me sustain, but I think I wound up getting like $300 for graduation from different people, right? So that wasn't the best thing for me, but I learned so much from that process that kind of led me to where I am now, speaking to students at the current moment. So that was that kind of journey. And then I winded up, once I realized that wasn't going to work out, that's when I went into corporate America for around three or so years. I don't know if you want me to start going into that journey.
So what was, you said you learned so many lessons from this initial, like, as some may see failure, but it wasn't really failure. It was a learning lesson. Like what were some of these lessons? All
right. So the number one lesson I learned, amazing question, was to just start. Just start. So here's what I believe. I believe that College Concierge wasn't for me at that moment, but without College Concierge, I probably wouldn't be where I am today in the student speaking industry. So what I say to people and everyone listening is there are some of you all out there who have an idea, and it might be a bad idea, and you don't know it's a bad idea because you haven't started. But once you go out there, you start, you have that bad idea and you're able to flush it out, it could sometimes lead or will lead to whatever that next idea is. So the first thing I want to say is like, start. And I'm so glad I started because I was able to like, some of the things that I talk about now is what I was going to talk about in those leadership workshops for those students. But if I would have never done that, what I could have done was I could have went to corporate America, worked there for 3 to 4 more years, started College Concierge, and then it failed. And now I'm 3 years behind where I could have figured that out 3 years before that. So that was like my number one lesson. My number 2 lesson would be like failure is so good. Like failure is a part of the process and you want to fail along the way. Because again, like you always learn something from that. And the third thing I would say I took from that, if I had to pull one more thing out of that experience, was the value and the benefits to being young, not having any, I would say, real responsibilities, right? I didn't have any kids at the time. I wasn't married at that time. I didn't have any crazy like bills or anything. So I could jump out there and try those things. So for those of you who might be in that position, now is the time to start. Now is the time to do those things and try it out. Because as you get older and you have those responsibilities, you have those kids, married, all those things, it's a little bit harder, or it can be a little bit harder.
Yeah. I am 1,000,000% with you on the same train of thought of like, you just got to start.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like something someone once told me, and it's a philosophy I try to live my life by, and it's changed my life in one of the biggest ways, is that a shitty plan today is better than a perfect plan tomorrow because tomorrow doesn't exist. Yes. You know, so it's like asking yourself, okay, well, like if you have this idea, this thing that you want to start, what is your shitty plan right now? And how can you do it today? Because
get it going.
You know what I mean? If you wait for perfect, we all know perfect's never going to come. Yes. So like 100% you got to take it. And I think there's like kind of the way I've started to look at failure as well, because I agree, like failure is a stepping stone. And sometimes I think we get so paralyzed by failure, right? We're like, well, then am I a failure? Is, you know, what are people going to think and all that? Yeah. And an interesting kind of way I look at it is it's like when you go to the gym, for an example, if you want to get fit, let's say hypothetically you need to do 100 dumbbell curls to get good muscles, right? To be like, have nice biceps. People are like, wow, that person looks strong. It's like, if you can imagine in your career, your business, whatever it is, okay, I need to do 100 reps to get quote unquote fit, to get successful. It's like every failure you have, just literally imagine yourself going, got to rep in. Failed again, got to rep in. Failed again, got to rep in. And then you're like, okay, well, I've only had 5 failures, 10 failures. I'm getting closer and closer to the 100, where that's when I get to the end destination.
And you will be okay. And you will be okay.
And you will be okay, for real.
One of my favorite quotes is a quote by Steve Jobs, where to paraphrase it, he says, the dots always connect. I mean, we can't connect the dots looking forward. We can only connect the dots looking backwards. So you have to trust that the dots, you know, will somehow connect in your future. And that's how I look at failure as well. It's like there are people listening and those of us who are like going through things right now, things are happening in their lives. And you're like, oh, why is this happening? Why am I failing? And what I've learned 100% of the time is those dots always connect in the future. And you have to wait to get there to figure it out. But looking back, I can always say, you can probably say in your career, like meeting this person, doing this, I didn't know why that happened, but now I know that it was because of this. And that's how I got here today. So yes, hands down.
Yeah. One thing that I think is interesting when, you know, like the thoughts of like talking about like connecting the dots in your past, like I think one thing that's so interesting is if you look back on your life and look at like every major decision you made, whether it was which path am I going to go, or like something happened to you in your life, an event you thought was going to be horrible. Like if you look back on those, 2 things happen. One, sometimes those painful things end up being one of the biggest blessings in your life. And the second thing is like, if you really look at every event that's happened in your past or decision you've made, truly every decision, every event really just gives you like a blessing, a lesson, a teaching, or something to prepare you for the next phase of your life. You know what I mean? And so the craziest part, I think, when it comes to like making decisions for our future and quote unquote connecting the dots forward, is it's like, well, if we look backwards and we know that every decision we made really just prepared us for the next thing, then the beautiful part is we can take this next step into our future without anxiety or stress, wondering, is it the right decision, the wrong decision? Because we know when we eventually can look back, will go, oh, that was just teaching me this, or that was giving me this skill, or that was connecting me with this person. You know what I mean? It's like, it almost allows us to step into our future with this like freeness of like, in a sense that you really can make no wrong decision.
And it's literally, I like how you said it's literally leading to the next right thing. And that's how you kind of have to think about it.
Yeah.
So whether it's a success or failure, no matter what it is, this is literally taking me down that path to whatever that next right thing is for me.
Yeah. So then, okay, so if we go back, we're sleeping on the couch, starting the business, one parent signs up, doesn't go the way we want, but we're like, hey, I learned a shit ton. So now you go into corporate America, and I'm curious for you, as you stepped into corporate America, what were some of the things you started to feel as you were, because I can hear it, feel it, and just know it from even researching you that like this entrepreneurship is in your blood. You know what I mean? You look at your story, it's written all over it. So I'm curious for you, like as you went into corporate, what did that feel like for you?
So I love people. I love being around people. I love talking with people. So I can say that all of my jobs that I went into, I enjoyed it in some way. So my first job was at Wells Fargo as a loan processor. I didn't necessarily like the job that much, but I enjoyed going because I enjoyed talking to people. I love my boss, right? I went to TIA CREF, was where I was talking to people every single day. More like I call it elevated phone call center, like a telephone center, because I had to get my financial licenses. But every day I was talking to people about their financial accounts, and I had so much fun with everybody around me, all my other teammates, like the people who call and the experiences that you had, like fun. And then I went into consulting for 2 years. And I would say that those are another 2 amazing years. But even though I was having fun, even though I was enjoying it, I was never fully fulfilled. So I knew throughout that process that I was trying to get back to entrepreneurship in some way and owning my own business in some way. But because I had that failure, right, and a lot of that stuff that happened with College Concierge, like I was putting stuff on credit cards. So during those 3 years, it was like paying down that debt, like getting furniture. Because when I moved into my first apartment, after I got my first job, I had a mattress, books, and my computer. Like 3 things that I had, and clothes. No furniture, no nothing, right? So it was just kind of like getting myself back to that foundation where I can like Maslow's hierarchy needs. I got everything I need. Now I can thrive from there. So I knew I wanted to get back to entrepreneurship in some way. And I can even remember this, dude. Like I remember having a mattress on my floor, books, all that stuff. And I was cleaning up my room at some point, and I went to YouTube. And I think that's where one of the first ways I discovered Tony Robbins and started listening to Massive Action and like all those things. Going to Amazon at that time and buying it's like Blue. I think it's Unleash the Power Within CD series. I used to actually listen to that while I was loan processing at Wells Fargo.
I love that.
So while I was working in corporate, I was like, okay, I was reading all these books, getting all this information. And a lot of the books I was reading was saying that in order to be successful, you needed to have either a mentor or a coach. I didn't have either. So what I did was I went to Google and I typed in life coaches in Charlotte. And this lady popped up. And I remember a quick story. I'm telling you because we're cool now. I remember like talking to her on the phone, right? And I was like, how much are you an hour? And she was like, it's about $150 an hour. And I was like, I don't know if I can do that. And then she was like, well, I do. No, I asked, I said, do you have like, if I buy multiple hours, can I get like a discount? And she was like, no. And I was like, oh, in my head, I was like, I respect that. She said, I have another coach below me who I'm like training. You can do her for like $50 an hour. And I was like, okay, I'll do that. So she started looking at the lady's schedule. And I was like, you know what? I'll take you. And I met with her at a Panera. And while meeting with her, she was like, Darryl, what are you interested in? What are you interested in? I was like, I might want to speak to students, might want to get into real estate, might want to do all these top things that were going through my mind. Yeah. And later on in the conversation, she goes, Darryl, your face lit up when you said something about speaking to students. Tell me more about that. And then she introduced me to the National Speakers Association, which is where, where all the cool speakers hang out. Yeah. And then it was at that meeting that I got that meeting literally that Friday. They only have a meeting once a quarter. I went to that meeting that Friday based on talking to her. I was the youngest person in the room at the time. And I was a few people of color at the time. And I was like, damn, like there's an opportunity for me here to spread my message around the country. That's the first time I realized that you can kind of speak professionally. And it was at that meeting that I decided that I wanted to quit my job within a year to speak full time. So that was one of those, I would say, pivotal moments for me as well. Yeah. All based on probably reading and like hearing people say like, you need somebody to guide you. And at that point, not having anything within myself to figure out what that thing was, I was like, all right, let's look for somebody else who can help me and guide me during that way. And I still use that advice till this day. Find somebody who can help me.
Yeah. And when we go back to like your 3 takeaways from that first failure, one was like start now. It's like one meeting once a year. And if you didn't Google that day, that lady, and then meet with her that week, like you would have never, you know what I mean? If you waited and you're like, well, I'll do it next week or next month, like you would have missed it and you would have missed this entire opportunity.
Yes. And it only happens once. They have a 3-day speakers academy meeting thing, and it only happens in December. So yeah, I would have missed it.
I call that grace in a sense.
Yes,
right. Where
definitely.
It's like you were meant to be in that room, truly.
Hands down.
So I'm curious how, obviously now you speak on being fearful to going to being fearless.
Yes.
And I'm curious for you, how did you land on, like this is the thing I want to speak on?
So how did I land there? When I went to that first meeting that we talked about, they were talking about that some of the most successful speakers, they're experts on something. Like you want to be an expert. And when I looked at people that I could speak to, it was like, yo, you can either speak in corporate America or you can speak to college students. But I knew that for corporate, I was younger, no hair on the face, probably 20, 19, 20. I was like, no one's going to listen to me. But I knew that I was an expert because I did well in college, all right? Very involved, all that good stuff. Yeah. So I knew that I wanted to speak to students about 3 things. The importance of the relationships that you build, starting early and pushing through fear. Because when I was in college, I ran for student body vice president. I had a lot of fear when it came to running for that. Decided to actually do that, ran, and actually lost by 19 votes in the closest election in student body history. So I knew by that failure again that I learned something from that. I grew from that even when I failed, like life goes on. Yeah. I'm growing. So again, I feel like we're finding some sort of like theme here. Totally. So I'm trying to think of the question that you asked. Where was I going with this?
How'd you get to fear?
Yes. So I spoke to a group of students at some point in those early few months. I don't know why I did this, but I gave out a note card. And I asked them, I said, hey, write down your fear. They wrote down that fear. And at that point, I told them I would take it home, burn it in a fake fire pit in my backyard and send them that video. So I got home, I read the fears, and I was like, these are really, really deep. And I kind of got emotional because what I realized was that those fears I was reading, there were students who, because I didn't go deep into fear in the early parts, that there were students who, because I was reading the same ones, probably went home, just like some of you all listening might feel the same way, that they probably went home thinking that they might be the only one going through these things. And at the end of the day, you are never the only one. So I remember going back to my coach that next month, telling her how I was burning these fears. She said, yo, Darryl, remember we talked about being an expert? She said, what if you don't burn the fears anymore? What if you actually start collecting them and then you build yourself as an expert on student fear because you have this pile of fears that you've collected and read. So at this point, I've collected over 55,000 written and virtual fears from people across the country. And that was been that journey, is that once I started collecting them, then I narrowed in because, again, I want to be known for something instead of just talking about many different things. And then I feel like once you get known for that thing, then you can be like a Tony or a Brendan, that once you get known, you narrow down, then you can talk about anything. Like Tony can sell you vitamins, or he can sell you UBW. He can do business. He can bring you to his retreat center and wherever that is. Right. So there's so many things you can do once you're known and once you're narrowed in. So that's what I've been doing. And my transition over this past year has been not necessarily from fearful to fearless, because I've evolved to believe that you should feel fear. So I don't want you to be fearless all the time. What I want for people is to have more fearless moments. So moments where you feel fear, but yet you act anyway and have more of those fearless moments. So even now, talking to you, I'm still evolving and trying to figure out like what that next thing is and how to impact more people. Yeah,
I love it. And if you're listening to this too, Darryl's shirt says I was scared and I did it anyway. So you know what I mean? It's like, feel the fear, push through it anyway. And so one thing I'd be curious for you is, like, let's say someone's listening to this and they're in a similar place where they're like in corporate and they've always had this seed kind of in the back of their head of like, okay, I know I eventually want to get back to entrepreneurship. That's where like the fulfillment is. And they're kind of in that same place that you are.
Yeah.
How would you say someone figures out like what they want to do as an entrepreneur, if
How do
that's
you figure out
the
what
direction
you
they
want
want
to
to go
do as
into?
an entrepreneur? So I really, I personally believe that we always kind of know what we need to do and want to do. We just sometimes need either that guidance or we just need to just like do it, as you said, like take action. But if I was telling someone where to start, I'm such a huge fan of coaching, man. Finding somebody out there, either coaching or some sort of events to go to. So for me, when I was kind of lost, I went to Tony Robbins events. Another example would be I found that coach. So find somebody to talk to. For some of you all, you might have some personal things going on where you might need to talk to a therapist first and then go talk to a life coach, right? But I would say find someone to talk to kind of like, I would say flush out those ideas in some way, especially if you don't have those supportive people around you to kind of like help you and push you. The second thing I say is when it comes to those different ideas that you might have, you don't have to think really big in the beginning, but figure out what is that smallest step that you can take in order to get there. So for me, I didn't start by speaking in front of 5,000 students. What I did was I started by going back to my alma mater, letting them know that I speak and speaking to them for free at first. Getting those first free speeches out there. And then that's what got me to where I am today. So for some of you all, when it comes to that business, no matter what it is, I don't care if you want to start a clothing store, you want to start a tech company, whatever that dream is that you have feels so big that you don't get started at all. Like, do not think about it. I hammer this home to friends and family when they're like, I want to do this. And I'm like, hey, all that stuff is distracting you. What is the one small thing that you can do today to get started? And that's what I use every day, whether I'm doing outreach, whether I'm doing a new promo video, whether I'm now like doubling down on like YouTube and putting more YouTube videos out there. So it's like, yo, my first thing that I did was I started a list of all the things I wanted to talk about. And then I found somebody to edit. And then I found somebody to do thumbnails. But y'all just start as small as you can. And if you can't find out what to do yourself, literally find somebody to talk to. Even if you have to pay them money, y'all. That $150 I was spending an hour, I would spend that like hands down over and over again because that $150 of value gave me so much
your life
long term. Yeah. And I'll pay more than that. I pay $10,000 a year for a coach, right? Because I expect that 10,000 will get me 10x in value. And it has.
Yeah. It's interesting you bring up the point of like, what's the first little thing you can do? Like yesterday, I was talking to some of our students and we're talking about very similar thing. Like sometimes we get caught up in this big idea and this thing. And it's like, there's this analogy and it goes, well, how do you eat an elephant? You do it one bite at a time. You know what I mean? So it's like, what's the one bite that you can take today?
Yes.
And go take it.
Yeah.
So, go ahead.
No, you helped me because so I have this slide in one of my presentations and one of my keynotes it says start small. And I put this boat on the slide. So I have these amazing ideas sometimes. And I don't like to put actual like words on the slide or stuff. So I put pictures that remind myself of what it is. Yeah. And I have an elephant on the boat. And I couldn't remember for the longest, like why I had the elephant on that boat. And I'm like, why is it? I still know what the boat means, but I'm like, where's the elephant? And now as soon as you said, I'm like, oh, that's what I meant. And I've been racking my mind for like the past like 6 months. That's like, what is that elephant doing on that boat? So now I know. Thanks.
Awesome, man. So one thing would love to hear from your perspective as well is, having more fearless moments is something you help people go through. And doing research and looking at this work you do with people, I would be curious, like, how would you say someone goes from identifying their fears to creating more fearless moments in their life? Okay.
So I created something called the hierarchy of fearless moments, which is probably what my next book is going to be about. 37,000 words written right now. So we're still working through that and processing that. But what I did was after reading, categorizing, like going through a lot of these fears, I found what those top fear categories were that was stopping people from getting to whatever that next level it is. And then I created a hierarchy to take students, individuals through in order to get to the top of that hierarchy, which is the hierarchy of fearless moments. So the bottom level of that is all about identifying and being honest with yourself about what those fears are. Right. So in my presentations, most people, that's the first time they've ever written down what they fear. Right. It's in their head, but it's not written down. It's not taken anywhere. So I think it's important for you to like start writing down or finishing the statement, I fear that, as in what's that thing that's stopping you from getting to that next level? Because I say, I don't care about your fear of spiders and heights. That's usually not stopping you from getting to that next level, unless you want to be a pilot or something, right? So identifying that fear, being honest with what your fears are, and not letting anyone change what that thing is, because you might not identify certain things as your fear because other people might not be afraid of that thing or whatever. So that's the first level, identifying being honest, and knowing also that fear is a good thing. We sometimes think of fear as negative, but
Right.
if you didn't have fear, like you wouldn't be alerted to danger. You wouldn't grow in certain ways. You wouldn't know ways to challenge yourself. So stop thinking of fear as a bad thing. Think of it as a positive thing. The second
Love
level
it.
is all about confidence and self-esteem. So I believe that self-esteem is much more important than confidence, because self-esteem is like, if everything was taken away from you, what do you truly believe about yourself? Where confidence is, you can be confident in certain things that probably build into that self-esteem. So my goal is always to help people to see, like, the people that you spend your time around makes a huge difference in those fears that you push through. I know that I'm not who I am without my friends and my family. They push me so much more than I sometimes push myself. The things that I'm listening to, the stuff that I'm consuming, the events that I'm going to, a huge difference. What I'm saying to myself on a daily basis. So when I'm having those negative thoughts, I literally speak back to those thoughts. Affirmations, all important things. What else can I throw out there? Like making sure I'm treating my body right, like going working out, like all of those build into that confidence. And once you have that confidence and self-esteem right, literally everything else flows from there. That's why it's at the bottom. A lot of people are trying to tackle their fears, and yet they're not even confident that they can get up in the morning. They're not even confident that they can achieve those small things. And we know, and as you know, that confidence is built by doing shit. Like that's really what the line says. You can only get it by doing shit. And by doing it, you have to do it by taking those small steps. So after you get through confidence, right? So after you're confident, you're ready to go, you feel confident about what you're doing, you have that self-esteem, then you start taking more risks, you start talking more, you start speaking up more. So the third biggest category I found is the fear of judgment and rejection. Meaning oftentimes it's that judgment and rejection that's stopping us because we care too much what other people think, all that stuff. So I talk about how feedback isn't always like bad. So sometimes people think that the feedback that they're getting from people is judgment, but no, like if you hear things multiple times from people around you, you probably need to start paying attention, and not everybody is out to get you
Right.
at the end of the day.
Sure.
So teaching people and helping you to realize how judgment and rejection is a good thing, how to take that feedback in. Once you feel more comfortable, like speaking up, dealing with that judgment and rejection, then you go to what the number 2 word is that I found is failure. We fear failure. So you start taking more risks. As you take more risks, you're going to fail along the way. At the bottom of the pyramid, it's kind of like a rotation where like you're becoming more confident. You're learning that fear is good. And then that leads you to the top of that pyramid, which is having more fearless moments. Because you're failing, and the more you fail, you reach that top. And when you get to the top, here's the thing, y'all, everyone listening, when you get to the top, it's not about staying there, right? If you want to stay there, that's fine. But with anything, it's all about pushing yourself more.
Absolutely.
Right? So when I hit 2,000 people in the audience, it's like, all right, that was scary, but hopefully I'm pushing myself again in order to push myself to whatever that next level is. It's like, I got to build that self-esteem again. I got to, push through judgment and rejection again. It's a never-ending process.
Yeah. Yeah, truly. It's like you got to get to the peak and then realize, well, now you got another peak to climb, and you got to continuously be pushing yourself, because that's where you grow. And as you grow, that's like the fun part of life.
It's a constant process, and it's a never-ending process, right? You're always going to feel fear. So it's about learning to work and act throughout that fear and anxiety and all those butterflies that we feel.
Yeah. So I'm curious, if you have something that you want to do or something you're pursuing in your life and there's fear around it, what are like 1 or 2 things that you do to like boldly step into that fear?
All right. So the first thing that I do, I would say, is I'm a dreamer, right? So I like to think about what that best case scenario is for me if I were to push through that thing, as well as like, what is that life? What is that legacy? All of those things to get that feeling inside to be able to push to do whatever that thing is. So that's the first thing, is I want to create that vision, whether it's writing it down, viewing it daily, looking at it, like reminding myself of those goals. We know that the more you see your goals, when you write those things down, it helps you in whatever that thing is that you're trying to push through. The second thing is for me, I have some great people around me, family and friends, where I kind of start testing it out with them, right? Sharing it with them. I know who to go to for certain things. I know certain friends, if I wanted to, they're like, yo, Darryl, you definitely got to do that. Like you have to, like, they're so... I've already sort of convinced myself. I might be scared, but when I talk to them, they're like, yo, why have you done that already? Like, let's go.
Yeah, I love that.
So that allows me to be able to push through that thing, is having those people around me that's pushing me. And then for me, we talked about this earlier, probably like 2 minutes ago, is I asked myself, putting everything down that I want to get accomplished for that thing, or that to make that thing happen, what is the one thing I can do to get started? Yeah. One thing I can do to get started, and stop thinking about the whole path. But one thing that I was struggling with is getting back into YouTube. And when I was thinking about the process, and anytime you're getting on video, I still don't necessarily like it as much, right? There's still judgment that comes from that. There's still, you want to say the right thing, like the video's on there forever. So I said, what is the best case scenario? So I started watching people who were successful sharing their message on YouTube. That got me going. I talked to my friend about, like, I want to do this. She's like, Darryl, you definitely have to do that. You were successful with that before. And I was like, what's the first step you can do? First step for me was list all the possible topics. I knew that in the past when I did YouTube, editing my videos was a huge roadblock to me getting out. So I found a company that can edit my videos. And then I set a launch date and had people hold me accountable. So that was actually a great question, because I was able to use something I recently did to like literally show you my steps to making that happen.
I love it. Yeah. Two things that I do. One very similar to yours is, it's like, I think sometimes when we step into fear, a big focus that we can build is like, what if it goes wrong? What if it doesn't work out? And we go down this thought of like, what if it doesn't work? But I think if you can learn to flip that on itself, kind of like you said, where you dream, it's like asking yourself, well, not what if it goes wrong, but even just asking yourself the question, what if it goes right? What if it all works out the way that it's supposed to? And if you can allow yourself to step into that direction, you will take more action, because now the belief you're building is, well, if I do this, it's going to lead to a positive outcome, rather than the fears and all those things. And then the second thing that I do, and it's interesting. The first time I did one of my own like speaking engagements out of college, this actually really helped me get over the initial fear of it, was asking yourself like, well, what's my fear? And when you figure out whatever your fear is, as a first step, like acknowledging and thanking your fear. Because at the end of the day, like, your fear is truly there to protect you. Like our caveman brain has the fear there because it says, I want to protect you. I want to make sure you're safe. So it's like, okay, identify my fear. Now that I know what it is, say like, thank you, fear, for trying to protect me and looking out for me. And I thank you and I appreciate you. But I must do this because of, and then just go crazy. List 5, 10, 20 reasons why you absolutely need to do this. And so then anytime the fear pops back into your head again, you go, okay, I know you're here. Thank you. And then like literally pull out that list, put it somewhere where you can see it every single day, because you go, but this is why I must do this. And that'll allow you, at least for me, those are a few of the things I do to step through fear.
That thank you thing is really, really good. One thing on top of that you made me remember is, so there was a study that showed that pretty much 85% of the things that we worry about never actually happen. Right. And even that 15%, they had college students write down like their worries. And even that 15%, they went back and asked them, and 90% of them said they either learned or grew from that situation. So when I'm nervous about things, and sometimes I'm nervous about things or worried about things or fearful about things that I might have done before, but it's still a different audience or something different than what I'm used to. And if we look back in our lives at the past of all things that we might have been worried about or fearful about, that we've been able to, like, for everybody listening, you've gotten through those moments already, right? You've been able to make it to today. So what I do is I'll look back and be like, yo, Darryl, you've had moments like this before. You've always made it through. So there's no reason why you're not going to be able to make it through this moment right here. That allows me to be able to push through a lot more as well. It's, yo, Darryl, you always survive. You always make it through. You learn something. You might be embarrassed at certain points, but yo, people forget. And the thing is, also add this, like, you're not as important as you think you are. People aren't usually thinking about you as much as you think they are. People are afraid to post, afraid to do videos. People don't really care that much. They're thinking about themselves most of the time. So you just push that out there. If you do embarrass yourself, like, it's not going to be forever, because those people are going to be thinking about themselves and moving on to their next thing. So something else to remember, you're not as important as you think you are to other people. Get over yourself.
Get over yourself. Love it, man. So Darryl, I'm curious, like, you obviously you have an immense amount of value. You're continuing to do a lot of impact. Hopefully got this book coming out some point sooner than later. So if people want to, just follow you, see what you're up to, stay tuned into your world, where's the best place for them to check you out?
So the number one thing that I'm like focused on now is YouTube. So my channel is Darryl Bellamy Jr. So please feel free to subscribe, check out the channel. At least one video gonna be posted there like once a week. At Darryl Bellamy Jr. on Instagram. There's content there. As well as fearlessinside.com for anybody who's interested in speaking, any of that type of stuff. I coach, I help people get to whatever that vision is. 3 things that I love fearlessness, I love personal development, and I love business. So if I can help you either of those 3 things.
Go.
Oh, so I think Stu coaches too. Don't you coach Stu?
Yeah.
So you got experts everywhere to help you find whatever that next thing is for you.
Love it, man. And we'll put all that in the show notes too, so you get real easy access to it. And so last question I have for you is a question we ask every guest because we want to help people find direction, but do it through action, is what would you say is one thing someone listening to this can do in the next 24 to 48 hours to start finding direction in their life?
The one thing that you can do is, I would say, write down the 5 people who have the biggest influence over your life. Not necessarily people you spend the most time with, but people you have the most influence on a daily basis. So it might be friends, it might be parents, it might be what are those things. And ask yourself, like, what are their like positive qualities? What are their negative? Like, how do they add or how do they take away from your life in any way? And then based on that, we want to make sure that those top 5 or whatever those, it might be more for you, people, that everyone around you is adding some sort of that they give more positive than negative in your life in some way. One thing that changed my life years ago is the ability to, when I got off the phone with someone, when I left someone's presence, I would ask myself, did that person take away from my life or did they add to it? And what I did was I started having less conversations with people who, when I got off the phone, I didn't feel the best about myself because they were making certain jokes or they were saying certain things, and my life improved so much. So I will scream this to the rooftop that the people you spend your time with, the people that you're listening to, the people that you're hanging out with over drinks or dinners, like, your life will be better when you start being around, having better conversations with better people. Do that. Yeah. Evaluate your circle, hands down.
Love it. Let's go, man. Well, Darryl, it's been an absolute pleasure and honor to have you here, man. Thank you for your wisdom. And I hope so many people listening to this say like, all right, today, not tomorrow, not next week, I'm going to take a fearless action. I'm going to step and be more fearless. So thank you so much for being here, man. Massively, massively appreciate it.
Thanks, Stu.